If you want to find out what it takes to make a video game, this is the place to be. Welcome to PAX East. A lot of people are here in Boston for 3 days to play games, but us? No. We're here on a mission. Somewhere in this mass of people are video game artists and animators, and the programmers and developers who make the artwork in the game. Let's find them and figure out how to draw a video game.
We're working on InnerSpace. It's an open world exploration game. We've been working on the code from scratch, art from scratch. We've been making all the shaders from scratch, so a lot of the looks and feels, sound, and all that is stuff that we've done ourselves.
The thing that we try to focus on most with this game is something called a shader. So think of it like materials, right? Like glass has certain specular properties, or like matte paint versus glossy paint, those have different properties, right? So the idea is that you can make a mathematical algorithm that can create these different properties, but because it's in a game, you don't have to just follow real rules. And so you can make stylized things. I can make one shader and then put it on like 10 different assets. Textures and things like that for every single asset would take a ton of time, so we just kind of opt to not do textures and do it somewhere else instead.
What's the coolest we can make it without any of those things?
And obviously when the question is, how cool can you make that look? I mean, we're looking at it. Your booth just drew me over and I had to come see what's going on. So before I leave, just ask your favorite thing about the game or the process of making it.
I'm a really big fan of open world games, and I just get lost in it. And that's really because of the controls that we've come up with, and kind of, even though it's a flying game, kind of getting rid of the anxiety that a lot of people feel about flying games, that if you bank too hard, suddenly now physics makes you fly into the ground. Instead, you can just really just relax and just enjoy the space around and really take the time to just simply look and see where you want to go and what you want to do. So that's probably my favorite thing.
InnerSpace is such a great game that shows what you can make without any textures. It's all solid colors. The shaders that Tyler talked about are little computer programs that define the colors, the shapes, and the look of the 3D art. But if you don't have any 3D models to work with, the shaders have nothing to do. So I noticed Becker College has an animator drawing 3D monsters right now, so let's stop by and see how to make characters.
I work mainly in ZBrush, Tamiya, into a texturing program called Substance Painter. All my models go towards making into games, and but this one right here that I'm working on is just a concept, just to kind of show what ZBrush can do.
Awesome. So just on the production standpoint, you build these 3D models. How do you actually get them to work in the game?
So what I do is I create these models that have, like this one has 2 million polygons in it. Doesn't quite mesh well in engine. You could probably put one of these in there before your game crashes. So what we do is we take these big models, re-topologize them it's called, where we just slap bigger polygons on top of them, make them a lot lower detail, put a texture map on top of that to make it look high detail, and then we can animate them from there, rig and animate them, and it all works in-game. So this is ZBrush for those that didn't catch that. It's a great concepting program. This is where he was yesterday. I decided I didn't like it, so I just chopped his head off, and I gave him a new ogre-ish looking zombie head, And this just happens really fast. Within a month, you can go from where he is now, textured, into the game, animated and everything. So
that is amazing.
It's a pretty incredible program.
All I have to do is turn around to see 3D models like this playing in games. Ooh, this one. This one's so cute.
We have 2 games, Yagata Piñata and Postal Paws. We have myself and we have a technical artist, but I basically make the look and feel and most of the artwork for all the games.
And when you're thinking about how you're going to make this artwork, and this artwork is going to be used in animations, is there any special thought process about how you want to make it look in order to work in the game when it's ready?
Well, there's 2 different art styles in both games. One is 3D and one is 2D. So the 3D one, you have to be cognizant of how many polygons you can use, especially on a mobile game. The devices aren't super strong, so you have to I designed really boxy characters on purpose because they are piñatas, so that kind of worked out. And for the 2D one, they are designed from the side, and they're broken out into pieces and then rigged with a spline in Unity. If the game called for a front or side view or a turnaround, we could do that too. You just have to do all the sides, just like in traditional animation.
Yeah, so that, just like a traditional animation, you have to design all the different sides.
For the Postal Paws one, I actually got to put my own dog in the game. You could be a cat or a dog, so one of my dogs is one of the characters, which is awesome.
Which character is it?
She's Gyoza. She's a mini husky. She rides a scooter.
That's awesome. Caitlin mentioned a role I haven't really thought of before, and that's a technical artist. There's a racing game down this way, and their technical artist is here. Let's go talk to him.
So this is Smuggle Craft. It's a hovercraft racing game with procedurally generated tracks and totally customizable ships.
Okay, so and you're the artist for this.
Yes, yeah.
Do you do all of everything?
So I'm more technical artist. So we have a modeler, Dana Huth, who she creates all the track pieces, and also like some of the like ship parts also. But I'm in control of all the color in the game. So I do a little bit of modeling, a little bit of special effects like explosions, smoke, particle effects, and shaders, lighting, things like that. Technical art involves just a bit of programming, but it's programming with art in mind. What curves and just like math can I do to this to make it really pop and just like follow the principles of animation that are like
motion.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes squash and stretch comes into account. Sometimes just like interpolation is something you think about a lot.
But you have to actually write that in. It doesn't happen automatically.
Yeah, it doesn't just like happen magically. Which luckily we're using an engine called the Unity. You probably know what that is. So like a lot of that is like made really easy and really accessible for you. So yeah, a lot of it's just tweaking what's already there.
So this is Perception. It's a narrative horror game where you play as a blind woman called Cassie. And you use echolocation, which is sort of like what bats do. So you use sound to see. And so you use a white cane, you tap, and every time you tap, you're creating noise and you're able to see. But at the same time, there's a thing in the world we call the presence, which if you create too much noise, it'll come and hunt you down.
I've been going around to all these different booths and talking to different artists and animators about their games, but one thing I haven't really had the chance to ask about is just the general pipeline of how you put a video game together from start to end. So tell me about your process on creating this game.
Well, it's interesting because every game I've worked on has been a very different experience. I worked on SWAT 4 or Bioshock Infinite. I think a lot of the most successful developers realize that you never really figure it out. You have to learn how to adapt. And so with Perception, I came from a very big AAA developer experience, and then with Perception, we were a much smaller, more tightly knit independent development studio. And so what's worked for us is because, well, one of the big challenges, first of all, has been that we're all remote. So we have people in Chicago and Texas and California, we're all over the place. So using things like Skype and online chat programs is a big help. And so for us, we come to an event like PAX, and we get all kinds of feedback, and then we think, okay, the game's perfect, it's awesome, and we put it in front of people, and they're like, oh, I don't really understand this, and people find one part really scary, and then one part not as scary, and so you're just constantly iterating on that. So that's the biggest thing, is iteration and adapting.
What's the story on where the idea for the game came from?
Yeah, I'm a big, huge horror fan, and so in particular, I was looking for a new way to inject life into the horror genre. What we always say is that information is the enemy of horror. And so we were kicking around ways to sort of withhold information, and the idea of, okay, well, what if you played as a blind woman? That hit us, and we was like, okay, well, that also gives us opportunity to, if you use echolocation, we have a unique aesthetic, and it's an interesting new perspective that I haven't seen in first person. It mainly came from a desire to do something different, and then once we had it, it was just sort of like, go, go time,
I've heard this a lot, and a lot of people probably don't know what this means, but iterating. When you're making a piece of art and it's iterative, what does that mean?
It means the first thing you do is not the final one. So you try to do it the first time, you realize what has gone wrong, what has gone right, and then you change what you think has to change. So usually with art, especially in games, it's like this, especially because it's not a product that you make for yourself. You're making for a consumer, there is a user, and what you think is going to work is usually not the first time, not what it works, right? not what works. So you have to take it out, put it in the hands of someone else, and see what is working and what is not, and change it. That's iterating.
And tell me about the game that's behind us right now.
So Holodrive is a free-to-play game that's out on Steam right now.
Tell me a little bit about the art behind the game.
A lot of things are hand-drawn in the game, like the power-up icons, they are hand-drawn, while a lot of other things are very clean in the game. So we try to make them stand out with illustrations.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting actually, because we talk a lot about designing the characters and designing the backgrounds, but things like icons and power-ups isn't something we really talk about a lot. What's like the process to thinking how you want those to look?
We started with like simple icons, just the ones you would see in like a website or something. We tried to make them minimalistic, like how usually icons go. But in our case, the game is very cartoonish. So if we have it very minimalistic, if we have like 12 power-ups, we don't have like 12 different colors that are very distinguishable, right? So it's a bit hard. So we tried to work with silhouette and color, and then we added more details so they stand out even more.
What's something that you enjoyed about making Holodrive here?
What I think is fun about games is working with other people from different areas. So usually I make a drawing, the 3D artist makes a model, and then there is an animator who rigs the model and makes the model, then the programmer puts it in game, someone else goes and makes some particle effects to go with it. To get it into the game, it's a long process with a lot of people involved. That's very fun.
The end has just begun.
We're here showing Pyre, which is by our team, the team that made Bastion and Transistor. It's a party-based role-playing game where you lead a band of exiles through freedom from a mystical purgatory.
One of the things that I really love about all the Supergiant games is the direction of the artwork. What's your extent of knowledge on the art direction?
Well, so I know Jen, who's our art director. Jen is our art director. She worked on Bastion and Transistor and came up with a look for both those games. She also does all the 2D art assets you see in the game. Her team is Camilo, who's a 3D modeler and animator, and Josh, a visual effects artist. So the three of them are responsible for 100% of the art you see in our games. But I know with Pyre, she was interested in trying something different with the art style, and different with the colors, and different with the world feel. And I think that comes across in what you're able to play here.
Okay, I've walked a few miles around the show floor, and I keep noticing this snake booth. I want to know the story behind this game, so let's make that our next stop.
Sumo Digital is a big studio, and we make like AAA games for Microsoft and Sony. We always wanted to make our own little thing, our own game. So in 2015, everybody in the company was allowed for one day to work on whatever they wanted. It's called a game jam. So during that time, I was actually just experimenting with Unreal, and I came up with the prototype for this. So I submitted that as a game jam entry. I won the game jam, and that led to initially a small team and a couple of guys, a couple of months to try to quickly make something we could put out on Steam. But when we showed the bosses after a couple of months what we'd done, they saw like the true potential, and they gave us a full-on team and budget and time. So we've been working on it with 10 to 20 people for the last year, and this is the end result, Snake Pass.
Did you need to do a lot of coding to make a prototype game?
No, that's the beauty of Unreal Engine. You don't need to know any code to make awesome stuff. The original prototype for this game was 100% blueprint, no coding involved.
Okay, the name of the snake is Noodle. How did he end up being so adorable?
And when we showed the initial prototype to people, a lot of the feedback we got was like, yeah, it's a cool idea, but I'm creeped out by it, because people have an inherent fear of snakes. So when we realized that was a serious thing, that was actually putting people off the game, we realized we had to make this like the most cute and lovable snake in the world. So we went through a few iterations, every time trying to make it more and more cute.
There are a ton of different types of virtual reality games here. If you haven't tried virtual reality because you're self-conscious about putting on big, bulky VR goggles and looking silly, which is how I felt for a long time, but I finally got up the courage to do it. It's an experience. There's nothing like it, so just put that to the back of your mind and try it if you get the chance. Anyway, I'm wondering if there's a special process for animating virtual reality games, so let's ask someone.
I'm an animator for this game. I make animations for the enemies and for the characters.
Do you have a model that you animate? How does it work?
Actually, we have modelers to make the model, and our rig rig the models with the bones. We use the 3ds Max and also use motion builders to create the animation. We will act the motions they will do first, and then we capture videos, and then we follow the videos to make the animations.
Oh, so that's very different. You actually act it out.
Yes, we will activate. You see that big boss. We will do like very strong motions and slow motions to make him feel strong and very, very huge. It's just like that.
What's one of your favorite things about the game?
I like the gameplay. I know our game designer is really good to create this kind of VR game. Actually, it's a kind of VR tower defense game. It's very new. It's a new idea for the VR games.
All right, so it turns out animating for virtual reality is very similar to animating for any 3D game. It was neat to see a game that used rotoscoping to animate their characters. I want to talk to another virtual reality game maker. There's a special place in my heart for the Myst games and the books, and I just heard that they're actually here. I had no idea they're going to be here, let alone with a new game series, so I have to go see this.
We're probably best known for Myst and Ribbon back in the day, and we've got a new game, Obduction, which is why we're here, which kind of is a new title, a new IP, new story, but a very same feeling to those older games.
And so, yeah, this game is a VR game. Could you tell me a little bit about if there's been anything different about developing a game to be played in VR versus the other ones you worked on in the past?
It feels like we've always, since we did Myst, have built games that felt real to us in 3D worlds. Myst was done, it was kind of ridiculous, but we rendered those still images that you play in Myst, one at a time. But for us, we were building real 3D worlds, even if it was presented differently. So this is just building the same worlds, just presenting them in a much more sophisticated fashion. And there are, you have to take into account if it's VR, you can't let people fall, and you have to change the way they move a little bit so they don't get sick. But yeah, it still feels like we're just building more and more immersive worlds.
Tell me a little bit about building the art for the game.
The process is very similar to what we've always done, and it's because we're focused on doing things that feel realistic, we want people to kind of lose themselves. We pay a lot of attention to texture and going out, photographing real textures and mapping them to places so that our worlds feel like a real place.
And one last question, what's it like for you to watch these people come in? Some of them have never used VR before, put on the headset and enter your world. What's that like?
Oh, I learned so much watching people. I've already thought of changes just from watching people in here, like, oh, we should do this, we've got to adjust this. That interface is a little bit this way, they're not noticing this, we should put something there. All those little tweaks that, it's the most satisfying thing, and especially when they're playing the whole game and they get those moments of, they've pushed through, they're not really sure what the game is, and then all of a sudden things start to click. They understand there's an underlying story that weaves itself through all of this, and they start to realize things, and they have those great aha experiences. We live for those.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the adventure with me. There's so much more to talk about, but I'll leave it up to you what you want to do next. The full uncut interviews from each of today's games are in a video linked below. If you want to play the games, all of that info is below too. And there are 3 other mini silly Scribble Kibble videos about PAX itself. It's been a very lively weekend. I want to play all of these games. How am I going to get any work done? If this is your first episode, Scribble Kibble is a weekly show all about animation, be it in movies, cartoons, video games, or real life. Special thanks and love to Alex Davidson and Keith Butler, my video crew for this unique episode, and Airship Media for lending the 4K resolution camera equipment. And thank you to Scribble Kibble sponsor Trevor Guerin. See you next week!